everybody. This is Cecel Doucette coming to you from WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts. I want to give a great deep thank you to our hosts here and our producer, Adam Rice. Thanks again for having us. And today on episode 45 of Tech Safe, we are so honored to have with us a wonderful colleague from Canada by the name of Shelley Wright. And Shelley has been a teacher for her whole career and wound up becoming overexposed to electromagnetic radiation. And she has been working so very hard in her community, in her schools, and with her legislators as well to try and create safe technology for our children, ourselves, and our environment in the end. So, Shelley, welcome, and thank you so much for all that you do. Please share with us, how did you get involved with the wireless issue? How did you first find out that EMFs even exist?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for allowing me to share the story of hope as well as injury. It was injury and hope. And I experienced wireless risks firsthand. I experienced adverse symptoms. So I've learned that I'm not alone and that my wireless-induced symptoms are also experienced by others. So before wireless, my life was pretty much perfect. I enjoyed windsurfing. I enjoyed skiing. I was an outdoors person. I enjoyed camping. And then 12 years ago, I began to get intolerable migraines. When we were camping, if there were cell towers close by, I would experience migraines, and I wouldn't feel well outdoors sometimes. And I didn't know why. I experienced symptoms of insomnia, intense foot, head, and breast pains. I experienced tinnitus and rashes. And when I was around cell phone calls, I'd experience pins and needles at the back of my head, and then building head pressure, which would subsequently lead to migraines the next day. Texts in public were the worst. So when people would text, I'd feel intense head pain, and multiple texts would be completely intolerable. So I found I had to walk away from areas where there were people texting, which is pretty much everywhere now these days. Right. I loved my cell phone in the beginning, and I communicated all the time with my children. And then I discovered that I needed to shorten my calls to feel better. I started using speaker mode, and I stopped texting altogether. But I still found this was not enough, and I still felt sick when I followed Health Canada's Safety Code 6 guidelines that you don't keep your cell phone close to your body. So my symptoms seemed to heighten in metal enclosures, such as elevators and cars, and I didn't understand why. When I was traveling down the street, I'd experienced electrical shocks in my brain, in my head, and I attributed that to Wi-Fi from homes. Texting at stoplights was really difficult. My symptoms were aggravated at traffic lights, and especially if there was a cell tower close by, I had to change my routes because I couldn't sit there and feel this disabling pain. I experienced adverse symptoms around all wireless products. So I often wasn't aware of the sources until I felt sick. So what I'd often do is try to look around and figure out, what is making me sick. And what I discovered is the severity of my symptoms depended on the signal strength, my proximity to the source, and the signal duration, the duration of my exposure. So these combined factors would lead to either mild, moderate, or extremely debilitating symptoms. Wi-Fi, cellular, and Bluetooth signals elicit different symptoms, and I discovered this through my journaling. So cellular signals are the most intense for me, followed by Wi-Fi and then Bluetooth. So cellular and Wi-Fi induce sharp-like electrical shocks many times more intense than the electrical pulses from a nerve test. So just ramp that nerve test up, 100 times more, and that's how my head feels. The central part of my brain is in the pineal gland region is where I would feel these sharp electrical like shocks. Within a kilometer of cell towers, or within 10 meters of cell phones, I'd experience sharp head pains in the central part of my head. And that was always followed by frontal brain head pressure and subsequent migraines the next day. So I'd always have what I call is an EMF hangover every time I was exposed in public. Wireless laptops created breast pains, the same electrical shock breast pains. School access points would give me head pains, frontal head pressure, migraines, rashes at the back of my neck, water blisters in the palm of my hands. And to alleviate this itch, I needed to dig my nails into my palms. It just was intensely itchy and painful.
Oh, for goodness sake, Shelley. I noted that you said you were keeping a journal. And that is just brilliant, because when our life starts to spiral and we don't know what's happening, sometimes we can't recall what had happened, and you just know it's bad and you're in fight or flight. But the fact that you sat there and documented it all is remarkable. And we know scientifically, we have peer-reviewed published studies that document all of these symptoms that you're experiencing are clearly related to man-made radiation exposures. When you talk about the stabbing headaches and the migraines, we know through one of your colleagues in Canada, Dr. Magda Havas, there's an effect happening called rouleau formation, where all of our red blood cells are meant to be free-floating and oxygenating all of our organs and cells. And when we are exposed to microwave radio frequency radiation from wireless, it starts to magnetize. So what should be free-floating starts glomming together, and then you've got this stack of now deformed red blood cells kind of looking like a chain that can't get to where they need to go to bring all of that oxygen. And with the skin, I'm horrified at the thought that the only relief you could find was to dig your nails into your hands, but I get it. And they have shown scientifically, again, that we have little antennas in the surface of our skin. And it's kind of like the birds and the bees. They've all got this built-in navigation stuff in their beaks or in their brains. Well, we have it in the surface of our skin, too, to help us navigate our world. Is it too cold outside? Is it too hot outside? And they're very sensitive to what the exposures are in the environment. And when we bombard ourselves with all of these microwaves coming at millions and billions of cycles per second in the megahertz and gigahertz range, it overpowers our skin and our organs. And so we have things like tingling, rashes, the little boils that you experience. A lot of people will first start talking about the heat that they're experiencing in their skin or the hot ear. So for anybody listening who thinks, well, geez, as one of our select board members had said, well, you're describing everything. Well, when we overpower our entire biological system with man-made radio frequency microwave radiation, yeah, it does kind of hit everything. And we're all very different. We all have our own immune system that is either top-notch, or it's been worn down over the years, or it can only handle so much in a day. And then we start hitting this tipping point where it cannot keep up and keep us healthy. So you mentioned Canada's Safety Code 6 tells you to keep these devices away from the body. And we know that if you were to go into the fine print of your cell phone in the legal section, it tells you right there, this was tested at a distance from the body. So if you're tucking it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt pocket or your waistband or your back pocket, you're exceeding the government guidelines for public radiation exposure. And here in the United States, just like you have Canada's Safety Code 6, we have the Federal Communications Commission that's supposed to be giving us safety guidelines, and they've never biologically tested this for safety. And in fact, they've recently been sued and were found guilty for ignoring 11,000 pages of evidence of harm. So what Shelley is sharing with us is horrific, but she's certainly not unique. We know far too many people who have figured out it's the wireless radiation that's doing them in, but there are so many and so many healthcare practitioners who have no idea what to do with somebody with these symptoms. So we're very grateful that some of your colleagues up in Canada joined us for the EMF, or Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference. And that had 24.5 continuing medical education credits available for 2 years. Now that that 2-year period has expired, the executive director of the conference, Elizabeth Kelly, has taken the entire conference and put it online at no charge. So all of our doctors, all of our dentists, all of our other healthcare practitioners, our school counselors, our town first responders, everybody can go get professionally trained by many of the world's leading doctors and scientists. And I was honored to be brought in to speak at that conference on state and local policy. As some of you know, we helped the state of New Hampshire here in the U.S. become the first in the United States to investigate. And we have this amazing 400-page report that documents the harm, documents the science, and makes 15 recommendations for what we should be doing to have amazing technology, but without radiating ourselves, our children, and our environment. So, Shelley, I know that you've done a lot of work up in Canada as an advocate, as a teacher, as a community member, and you've also partnered with many of the medical professionals in Canada. Tell us about what you have been doing to give us hope, because like you said, it's everywhere. So what do we do?
It is. And, I'm so glad it took me 2 years to get a medical diagnosis, but I'm so glad I did get one from the director of the environmental clinic at Women's College Hospital in Toronto. And she's also the chair of the environmental health committee at the Ontario College of Family Physicians. So in terms of what I've done a number of different things in my community to protect myself and my community as well. I have a home and cabin that's fully wired with plugged-in Ethernet cords, and friends and family who visit turn off their antennas and their cellular and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas. And there are many things that I've done in terms of educating people. So I find that if you tell people that they can turn off their antennas and still take photos and share previously downloaded data and use cords, Ethernet cords, and adapters, they can use all their fun-loving devices in a safer way. So in the community, to prevent cell tower injuries, I joined residents and did municipal presentations to move cell towers. This is to protect medically vulnerable residents, schools, and daycares. And with local and municipal council support, we experience success. So I don't do these things alone. It takes a team of us to do it together. For provincial and federal governments, I've raised awareness and expressed concerns through Auditor General petitions, submissions to Canadian senators, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, which is ISED, and the Standing Committee on Health, which is called HESA, and the Industry and Technology INDU committees, the Minister of Health and the Minister of Education. And what I find is that Safety Code 6, like any of the regulatory organizations and guidelines, they are not protective of medically vulnerable people, children in schools. And I mentioned in these submissions that cell towers need to be at least a kilometer, 500 meters to at least a kilometer away, or they need to satisfy the building biology standards and the bioinitiative report for RF exposures, which I believe should be, less than 100 microwatts per meter squared. So we're still working on making this a standard. For outreach presentations, I was a guest speaker for 2 accredited EMF electromagnetic fields medical symposiums sponsored by Women's College Hospital. I've done presentations in other provinces for communities across Canada. And I'm a member of the CE4ST leadership team. I moderate meetings, invite safe tech speakers like yourself, and do municipal presentations to assist others.
Shelley, can you tell us what CE4ST is?
Yes, CE4ST stands for Canadians for Safe Technology. And Frank Clegg is the CEO of this wonderful nonprofit national organization. And we bring safe tech into communities. And it's a fabulous organization to become a member of. It truly is wonderful.
Well, I'm so grateful for what C4ST has done. For those who are not familiar with the name Frank Clegg, he is the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And some of Shelley's colleagues approached him many years ago and met him at his home, Dr. Magda Havas. And I don't know if Sheena Symington was involved in that meeting.
And so was I. Yeah.
Oh, you were. Excellent. So tell us how that went. How did you go to a captain of industry and help them to understand that we've sort of created a monster here?
Well, maybe I wasn't a part of the initial meeting.
Yeah.
But as soon as things got started, we started with telephone calls and doing conference calls, and that's how things got going. So that would be a story that Dr. Magda Havas could probably say how he got started. But there was a Wendy walk. There was somebody who was involved in walking across Canada to raise awareness because she was electrosensitive. And through that whole process, Frank Clegg came on board and met with politicians in Ottawa. And this is where Canadians for Safe Technology really, truly began.
Oh,
but there are others that can start with the sister organization and describe that more in detail.
Okay. Well, thank you. So Frank Clegg I'm just so indebted to him. He has shown up time and again. He joined our technology panel down at the National Institutes of Health back in 2018 to say that basically if we give industry a nudge, they can absolutely do better. So we're so grateful that he also testified with the New Hampshire Commission and was instrumental in helping them to understand that, yes, we have a problem here, but we can absolutely bring forth solutions. Dr. Paul Heroux, who's also from Canada, from McGill University, he testified and actually then was appointed to serve on this commission. And he is now working actively to come up with engineering solutions alongside Dr. Kent Chamberlain, who at the time of the New Hampshire Commission was the chairperson and professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of New Hampshire. And I see that they work on projects together from time to time. Maybe they can engineer phones now, that when you pick it up, if it goes anywhere near your head, it kills the signal, so that we force people to learn how to use these devices safely. And for folks who are new to the conversation, when Shelley talks about using cabled connections, it's not rocket science, you guys. On the back of your router, there are Ethernet ports, and all you have to do is plug in an Ethernet cable. And then you can buy little adapters, $20, $30, that then hook right into your device. And then once that happens, you just go into the settings and you turn on your airplane mode, you turn off the Wi-Fi, you turn off the Bluetooth, you turn off the hotspot, and poke around any other antennas that are in there. Each one is separately pulsating this electromagnetic radiation to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And again, the message is not no technology, it's safe technology, and we know how to get there. So, Shelley, go ahead, continue. So you figured out it was the man-made radiation that was making you sick. It took you 2 years to align yourself with a healthcare practitioner who understood this and could give you a clinical diagnosis of electromagnetic illness. And then knowing what you know, you recognize that you have a particular background and skill set that would allow you to present the facts, to write the facts, and to get them in front of important decision makers. I am just gobsmacked that you guys actually succeeded in getting cell towers addressed, because oftentimes once they go up, mercy, it can be almost a miracle. But I think you hit on the key point. Don't go it alone. You need to build out collaboration and coalitions with those around you who have skin in the game, people who are at risk. If you have a cell tower 500 meters from your home, which in our language is 1,640 feet, that is representative in the epidemiological studies or the scientists who study what happens in society rather than in a lab. In those epidemiological studies, we see the death curve, the neurotoxicity curve, all those symptoms Shelley mentioned, the headaches, the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, start to come down at that 500-meter mark. They don't actually catch up to regular population statistics until almost double that, which is why Shelley was recommending a kilometer or at least 3,000 feet from where these massive exposures or any exposures are coming from. So we also know in the scientific literature that children are especially vulnerable. For one, they're still under construction. Their very central nervous system, their immune system, is still forming. And scientifically, through the lab, we know that this is damaging DNA, which is the roadmap to grow a proper anything. We know that children's skulls are thinner and that they have a higher water content in their brains. So when we hold a cell phone up to a fully formed adult skull, that radiation is pulsating into our brains about this far. On a 10-year-old child, it's pulsating, about 3/4 of the way into the brain. And on a 5-year-old child, if you put that cell phone up to the head, it's microwaving almost the entire brain. So we know we have got to step up and start protecting our children. And with great thanks to this very courageous New Hampshire Commission, they recommend transitioning to hardwired technology in our schools, to educating the public, to getting our federal delegates back on board with this, to train building inspectors on what this radiation is. So if a person is looking to buy or lease a home, they could hire a professional to go in and take measurements. And at the EMF Medical Conference, this particular meter was recommended. It's called the Safe and Sound Pro 2. It is calibrated, certified third party, and it's a highly effective scientific instrument. So for anybody who is getting into this work, who is getting symptomatic, you really would do well to invest in a radio frequency radiation detection meter. And this one is about $400. It's got a little baby sister one that's about $200. But for those of us who are working actively in this field, this one tells us exactly what the readings are. So it's important to cable your connections, turn off those antennas, and then measure, because with 5G and the Internet of Things, the industry is forecasting that we're all going to have 200 plus emissions in our own homes from all this smart new technology and appliances and utility meters that they're putting on our home. That is a wallop of exposure. So if you don't have a meter, you might miss some of those exposures because they're invisible. We kicked off a pilot program in my little town of Ashland, Massachusetts, and we were the first in the nation to get local funding to put one of these meters on loan in our library. So if you can't afford to get one on your own, I know others that are getting together with their friends and loved ones, and they all pitch in, and then they just borrow it from each other. But it's really important because at least with smoking, when big tobacco was doing their thing, at least we could smell it before vaping came along. So it's critically important to measure. So Shelley, let's keep going with your story. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that in terms of this, wireless radiation affected my life greatly. It was socially isolating, financially costly. I could only spend less than 10 to 15 minutes in public places. To reduce debilitating symptoms, I had to avoid or minimize my time in grocery stores, restaurants, public libraries, museums, churches, community centers, and I can't ride public transit like buses or trains ever until they accommodate us. Mm-hmm. Restaurants are often off limits with the exception of secluded patios or 9 o'clock dinners, and definitely not on weekends. Mm-hmm. So our road trips are calculated carefully, and I'm not an anxious person by any means, but when I do see a wireless device, I know I will suffer. So I do become a little anxious and concerned about that. I've jumped through political hoops at work, which have been mentally taxing and physically exhausting. EHS disabled people in public must ask strangers to use airplane mode and hope for a positive response. Family vacations are difficult and more expensive when you need Wi-Fi absent, transportation, and accommodations. And lack of public accommodations mean that we experience daily social isolation, which can be very challenging. And before wireless, I had an exceptional attendance at school. Limited workplace accommodations led to migraines and MS-like symptoms in the classroom, which was confirmed by a neurologist who did a test. I couldn't teach full time. I turning off the access point in my classroom, and safe tech training for students and staff would have made a big difference for my ability to teach longer than I did. This disability is financially taxing. EMF shielding and clothing are pricey. Protective clothing is quite costly. I've purchased a bed canopy to block the signals from neighbors. And our neighbors are super good now. They've turned down their signals so that I don't need the canopy anymore. But RF meters to measure and minimize RF exposures are very costly as well. Additional supplements for methylation. We purchased organic food. And for me, unfortunately, the clothing did not make enough difference. It didn't block all the signals. And wearing a hazmat suit in public is not okay. I think we as compassionate communities can reduce our wireless so that people like me can participate fully without having to wear hot, uncomfortable hazmat suits.
Yeah.
Public health campaigns can educate Canadians and reduce signals in public. Mm-hmm. So we're often too sick to advocate for ourselves, and we need medical professionals and others to voice, to urge health organizations to acknowledge peer-reviewed independent science, which repeatedly shows that EHS is medically supported and scientifically proven a vulnerability and a disability.
Oh, Shelley, you are so well spoken, and I know we had a conversation that because you can, you do. Because you can communicate well and get out there to a certain extent, you do give of your time so generously to help others. The acronym that Shelley was using was EHS, electrohypersensitivity, or what now is being called electromagnetic radiation syndrome all around the world. So Shelley, I want to thank you for joining us for this first episode with you. I hope to have you back on another episode so that we can talk more actively about protecting our children. That's where big tobacco started to crumble. And I think that if we can make it so clear what is happening to our children in our schools, then we can perhaps make some serious inroads to help them sooner rather than later. Well, we are out of time. I am so grateful you joined us today, Shelley, and we look forward to setting up our next episode with you.
Thank you so much, Cece, for this opportunity to share my voice with you and others.
All right. Well, everybody, have a Tech Safe Day. Join us at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. And when I post this on YouTube, we will also share information for how you can contact Shelley and the organizations that she is so active with. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.